We've enjoyed a very strange time of ease, of not striving to survive, which is basically what all other animals do. We go to the grocery store and do our jobs, which are, for the most part, not too crazy, but every other organism has to fight its whole life just to survive, just to eat, to drink, and be able to just live. I talk about pictures in my book, and I wrote a little thing about this, but I think I'll just skip that. I'll just say that pictures are for tourists. I'll just, if you want to learn more, it's a tourists of life, that is. Okay, thought and the ego. Everybody on Earth thinks, hope, and everybody has an ego, which is a sense of self, who you think you are. Socrates once said, "Know thyself," and that's a scary notion for many. Everybody's in it for number one, but they don't even know what number one really means. When do you begin? When do you end? Who are you? If this is asked to somebody, it's usually answered by what they have, their possessions, whether a bicycle or a car or a house or a backpack, it doesn't matter. Or memories. It could be what experiences you've had in the past, personal experiences, the things that we think the person owns, what they like, what they prefer, what family, club, or group they identify with, what they do, what their body or face look like, what they think. Always the I, which nobody really describes after answering who you are, and a relationship to it, many relationships to it. The I isn't addressed at all, but only has relations added to it. One can end up explaining the whole universe eventually. Then they would see that they are the universe, because that's what the I really is. The self is only a system of identifying with things in reality that will survive. The self is an illusion that helps us survive. It's a tool. We identify and live in our bodies and our heads. Is this why we are so preoccupied with faces as being one's identity? And that's the center of social living. You look at everyone's Facebook picture or their driver's license, and all you see, or anyone with a business suit, right? You see everything covered, except their hands, and then the head. It's just right here. That's all it is. That's actually not what it is at all, but we tend to associate this shape with who they think they are. Everybody has an identity crisis because of this. This is the midlife crisis throughout one's whole life. Nobody knows who they are. Is the greener grass on the other side if there's only one side? There's no greener, better, stronger, nicer, prettier, smarter, happier. There's nothing more. How nice it is that truth can be both sobering as well as intoxicating at the same time. Images is where we get our thoughts from. They are memory, they're knowledge. Knowledge is only made of images of what we personally experience. The genes of thought, you might say. Thought is a tool, not a factory. It's the ego, it's the core of it, which vanishes once you dig deeper and find out what it actually is. Like a hat or a headdress, it's all fluff in the end. Thought is a way of making a living. It's not a life. It's not a way of seeing life. And then I go on to talk about addiction and how thoughts make people addicted to different kinds of things for different reasons. It comes down to emotional attachment, being dissatisfied, feeling like there's something they could gain by being more or doing more or eating more or anything more. It's the ego's way of latching onto something so it can remain unchanged and intact after a drastic change. Like forever tying a boat to a sometimes calm and somewhat stormy harbor just because it can be stormy at times. Addiction is an extreme sense of lack, which then breeds the desire for more. It's extreme less that creates extreme more, tying back into the economy and why we need so much more than we used to. Addiction is needing something you don't need. This is the hallmark, one of the hallmarks of humanity. Taking necessity, viewing it as less, not enough, and then trying to overcompensate. What is this insistent need for more? Too much love and one becomes selfish. Too little and one desires selfishness. Mechanical habits strain and restrain the brain. Thought always partially blinds the mind. It helps. Everyone should think. But it's always partial because it's always based on memory and an image of what reality is. The ego says, I'm right. I'm smart, special, and all else is lower on these fronts. To be higher than the rest, the ego must push everything down. It must make something else to push down in the first place. All else is dirt beneath one's sense of self. And that's kind of put down to dirt, because dirt is actually pretty crazy. We don't tend to think of it that way. A sense of self is like a sense of security, or hope, or fear. Now, I'm a security guard, and I know very well that security is a sense. It's not something that's real. If you go to a bank, you think your money's safe, Citibank just got hacked. So where's the safety? You put your money in the safe at home. It's not safe. You can crack it. Somebody can steal it. It's not really safe. Someone's house, they lock their doors. You know, they roll up their windows. That's not safety. It's a way of not thinking about being insecure. It's a way of sleeping well at night. That's the survival mechanism that it is. Because absolute security doesn't exist. That's the ego's way of saying that the ego will live forever, it's going to be unchanged. It's false. It's a helpful illusion. Security and safety spring only from the idea of past and future, not from the present moment, which is reality. That's all there is. And the present moment isn't just now, it's the past and the future, not just the past and the future. And I talk about that more in my book. I think I'll skip a little bit of that. We take our own bodies, we take objects, and we put a skin around it. Like we think that's what separates each other, our skin, right? Which is completely false. We put clothing around it, a tent, a house. It's interesting that when we go camping, we put a tent around ourselves, and we think that is a sense of security, right? We feel a little bit better than just laying out in the bush. But in reality, it's the tiniest little film of fabric, which is the mind's way of calming itself. It's petting itself, making itself feel a little bit better. When really it's just a little piece of fabric. It's nothing. The world is blurrier and hairier than that. We are not containers. Without thought, there is neither inner nor outer. Thought is the skin we think separates in from out. Can we live every day with this awareness? All ego is maniacal. We have ideas of things, and that of the actual things. Like when somebody dates somebody, they break up. They're talking to their friends, and their friends say, "Was it him, or was it the idea of him? Right? Was it her, or was it the idea of her?" And the problem with relationships is that the mind makes an idea, an image of the person that they're in a relationship with, instead of seeing them as they actually are. And that, I think, causes a lot of problems. Oh, you used to be this. I had an image of you, and you changed. So the ego doesn't like change, and it focuses on images instead of reality. And that's why a lot of people get divorced or have fights every day or whatever. The main defense mechanisms of the ego are repression, projection, denial, and rationalization. The sense of self is just that. It's just a sense. What is it that gets disrespected or disagreed with? What is it that fears death or fears pain? What is it that likes pleasure? Is it simply thought itself? You think you know who you are. You don't. Can we revolt against the government of thought? There's no inside or outside. Conflict is what we do when escaping perceived boredom. But this boredom is really peace. Boredom is frustration in the face of the lack of pain or pleasure or stimulation, as we tend to think of it. Conflict is the frustration in the face of pain and pleasure. It's also this. It's the frustration. Quiet is what is needed to quiet the mind. When we sleep, They've done brain scans where if you sleep, the brain activates. It wakes up, and all of a sudden it's fluttering with these light images. And we can be awake while our mind is, in a sense, asleep. And then you can see things a lot clearer, I think. Talk about the feeling of what an emergency is, what goes through our body, and flow. Athletes, artists, meditators, regular people lost in their passion, losing themselves in the moment. It's effortlessly forgetting the ego. Not thinking that it is, not trying to get rid of it, as a side effect of taking the perfect delight in the task at hand. So much that the observer melts into the observed. Time stops. The sense of who you are stops, and so does thought. Or it flowers. It either stops or it flowers, whatever idea you want. Okay. Don't go with the flow, go as the flow. Desperate times lead to desperate measures. When survival is compromised, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, food, water, shelter, security, belonging, it drops into a flat plane. The basics. This is the fight or flight in a state of emergency, which minus the stress and minus the sense of danger, that's the present moment that you sense. An emergency is a sudden loss of the image of our sense of security and stability. Step one in any emergency is to notice it as such, to notice the importance of it, and step two is not to panic. And I think those two steps can be taken concurrently or at the same time. Look at the games we play, the social games, the Olympics, the Stanley Cup playoffs. I don't know. Who won yesterday? Did anyone? Are they still playing?
Boston won.
Boston won. Okay, so they have one more game to go. People get crazy over these things when really it's meaningless. It's absolutely meaningless. Try telling that to the fanatics, right? Which is where fan actually comes from. It shows our pettiness and our superficiality. It shows our tribal past. America, Canada, Vancouver, Boston, whatever you want. So many care about things so utterly meaningless. I also talk about science and religion in my book, and the false conflict between the two. They seem to me to be either estranged twins or quarreling parents, when they really just don't need to fight at all. They talk about different things. The two domains of understanding, nature and ourselves, are social projections of humanity's rational and emotional mind. Science tries to be rational, tries to find the facts, and religion is emotional. It tries to understand the meaning of life, morality, and treating one another respectfully. The two magisteria, or domains of science and religion, are based in knowledge and are thus always limited. Good and bad weather illustrates our human concept of morality because it is socially and human-centered. It makes sense that any concepts concerning ethics and the meaning of life, what is divine, etc. For people, reality is usually mistakenly imagined. Organized religion is obviously silly. To unlearn